Hello class, welcome back. So I want to start by implementing some quality of life changes in our project. First one is that I noticed that for us to run both the server and the client, we have to go in the root of the server and say npm run dev and say the same thing in the root of our client, which can be a bit of a hassle if you're starting and stopping your server often. So what we can do, we can use concurrently, which is this really nice tool if you haven't seen before, which does exactly that. It lets you run multiple things concurrently, which means at the same time if you're not aware of the terminology. So let's use that. So in the root of our server, let's say npm install dash uppercase D concurrently. Hit enter and let that install. And the way we can use it is, let's go to our root package.json. Let me make this bigger. So if we scroll down to our scripts, we see we have a dev script for our server. Let's add another script as well for our client, and let's call it exactly that. So client, and this will cd into the client, and it will run dev. So npm and npm run dev. And let's rename this to server, and let's recreate the dev. So let's add the dev script here, and the dev script will now use concurrently. So let's say concurrently, and we need to concatenate both the commands. So the first one will be the server. So let's escape the double quotes and say npm run not dev server, and then escape another quotation mark and add the other one. So now escape another quotation mark and say npm run client, and then escape another quotation mark. All right, so save this, and now in our root directory, let me close this. Let's type npm run dev and hit enter. And there we go. So now you see that it ran the server using nodemon, and it also ran the client. And you notice all of the prints that say 0 are the server, because that's the first one, and all the ones that say 1. Actually, you know what? We can change it. So let me close this. So here in the dev script, here in the concurrently, we can add an option -n and say server, client. And now if we run it, it should give them aliases. And it does. So anything printed by the server, it says server here, and anything by the client says that as well. So by the way, actually this stands for names. I tweeted about this a while ago, and by the way, you should follow me on Twitter if you haven't done so yet. And I say that you should always use the flags as the full flag name, so that I used name, no pun intended, and until you get used to it, so you remember what it is. So if you do just -n, you might not remember that it stands for names, and next time you're not going to remember what it is. So use --names until you remember what it is. Of course, this example is not the best, but hey, it's a good tip anyway. All right, so we got concurrently set up. I want to set up another thing. I want to have a bit more data to work with, and of course not have to type it manually every time if we want to make a change in the database or something. For this, I'm going to use TypeORM seeding, because TypeORM by default does not come with a seeding tool. And what seeding is, if you don't know what that is a thing that a piece of code that populates your database with fake data or any like hard-coded data that you want to be there. An example of this would be, for example, if you have Google Maps, you want to add a seeder for the list of countries. So you seed your database when you deploy. But for us, we're just going to create some fake data. So here it shows us how to use it. This is a seeder class, but before we do that, actually these are entities. So before we do that, let's, so here installation, we just need to install TypeORM seeding and then add these to the configuration. So let's go to our client, terminal, close it, close the server, and say npm install TypeORM-seeding. Let that install, and let's configure it. So we're gonna add, we don't need factories, we're just gonna add this seeds entry in our ORM config. So let's go to our ORM config and paste that inside the CLI, or actually no, not inside the CLI, outside here. Wrap this with the double quotes and change these to double quotes and save. And what else? We have, yeah, we need these scripts. I believe we don't need the config script because it configures it once you seed. So I'm just going to copy the seed script, and let's go here in our package.json and paste that. I'm just going to call it just seed, save, and I'm going to copy a file from off screen. So I'll copy this, I'm gonna go to source. Let's create a new folder, call it seed or seeds, and create a new file in there. I'm just gonna call it create data.ts or maybe fake data. And there I'm gonna paste this, and you're gonna find this in the Git repo in the description of the video. You can copy it from there. And what this is basically is just some posts that I copied from Reddit, along with some comments and votes and like our 2 users here. So save this. I'm just gonna drop everything in the database. So in the terminal, I'm gonna say npm run not dev TypeORM, TypeORM schema drop, and now let's run migration run, and now we can see the database. So we can say npm run seed, and there we go. It's configuring the database and it's ran the seeder. And if we go back to our app, actually it's not running. Let's say npm run dev, and now if we refresh our front page, we should get the new data. Let it build. And there we go, we get like a bunch of posts that I copied from Reddit. So now we have more data to work with, so it's easier to test stuff. Next thing I want to configure is this library called SWR, which stands for stale while revalidate. And it's a tool that actually Vercel, the Nextjs creators, they really recommend using this. And actually some of you guys recommended this to me a while ago, and I started using it. It's pretty cool. What it basically does is when you fetch data, it before you try to fetch it, it tries to fetch the cached data from the HTTP request to that same resource that you requested. And if it finds that cached data, it serves it, and then it goes ahead and fetches the new data and then shows it. So this has a bunch of nice tools. Like one of them is like deduping request, which means if you request, let's say the user, and then you request the user again within a very short period of time, it's just going to serve you that cached data. So it's very good for our server. It kind of like reduces the load on our server, and you can configure it to work with anything. For example, here they have this, so it's a hook called used SWR, and you get data. It's kind of similar to Apollo GraphQL if you've worked with that, like in the sense of like syntax. So you get data and an error, and you can use those later in your UI. And let's go to get things started. So it shows us that that fetcher function that you pass it to fetch the data, it can use anything. So here it's using fetch, and for us, we're going to use Axios, so we can configure it to work with it as well. So let's actually use this. So let's go open a new terminal and not console log, the cd into the client, and npm install swr. Minimize this, and let's go to our client in the source. We need to actually, we don't have to, but we should configure it globally so we don't repeat ourselves. So let's go to, where? Yeah, here. Global configuration. We need to, actually I'm just going to copy this from there. And let's go to our app.tsx. And here at the top, let's import use SW. Actually, we don't need use SWR here. We're not fetching any data here. We just need the config component. And let's wrap everything in our app with that. And let's take the closing tag and put it under the auth provider. And this will complain because we need to set up the value. And the value here needs a fetcher. So this will be the default fetcher. And for this, we're going to use Axios. So this will actually be a function that takes a key, which is a URL, usually, for us when we're using just the REST API. And it returns a promise. So the promise will be axios.get, and we pass it that URL. So this is the default one. If you need to use something else, you can customize it later when you use SWR. Make sure that you have Axios. Yeah, we do. So let's save this, and let's go to the index page and start to use it there. So here in the index, we're just fetching the data like we did before with the Axios. So now let's import that hook. So import use SWR from SWR. And here, instead of this use effect call and also the use state, we don't need these two. We're gonna say const, and we're gonna get data from use SW equals use SWR. And our route will be /posts. And this alone will fetch the data, but of course we need to call it posts. So let's give it a name of posts. And this initially will be null. So here let's add a question mark. So it can be null. If it's not null, we just don't show anything. I mean, if it is null, we don't show anything. So let's save and let's see if this is working. Okay, no errors in the console. Let's go back to Chrome. And there we go, we get an error. So post.map is not a function. And that's because, okay, I think, did I mess up the syntax? Okay, let me check the documentation. Oh yeah, of course, I forgot to change the .then. So here we don't return just axios.get, because this returns a promise with Axios response. We need to tell it what to do with that response. So we'll say .then. When we do get the response, then return to us res.data. So now save this, and now that should work. Okay, and it does. So actually there are a couple of cool things. If we open the DevTools and we go to network, let's actually go to XHR request and refresh. So refresh, you see that there is a post request. Actually, if we refresh the page, so we'll see there's a post there. And if we go to login and we come back quickly, actually, let me try again. You see, so this time, not this, like this time, for example, we went to login, we came back, and there was no post request because it took, I think, okay, let's see the configuration. Let's go here, options. It should be this one, deduping interval, which I assume is deduplicating, which is a time window. Within this time window, if you request the same resource, it's not gonna fetch it again. It's just gonna give you the cached data, which is pretty nice. So within 2 seconds, if we navigate quickly away and come back, it doesn't request it again. And we can customize this. So if we can go here, take this deduping interval and go back to our code, go to the global config and here add that. And let's give it, for example, a value of 10,000, which is 10 seconds. If we go back to our app, I'm just going to refresh just in case. So we get post, and if we go to login, we come back, and again, nothing happened. We don't get post again within 10 seconds, which is pretty nice. Because it depends on your app. For example, for this app, we can probably assume that there's not going to be a new post within 10 seconds. And if we refresh the page, it's still gonna get it anyway. So that's one of the many things that I actually haven't been using this for that long, so I still need to play a bit with it more to like get the most out of it, kind of use all of its features. All right, so that's the SWR hook thingy done. Let's actually do the subpage. So I want to create the page where when we go, okay, this link is not working. Okay, let me check why. So that's the postcard. Oh, okay, so I think my trick did not work. Okay, my spaghetti code is not working. So this probably doesn't work. So let's just keep that link as it is. And I'm just gonna create another link for the anchor tag for the actual text link and one for the image as well. So do that, what we initially had. So now it should work. Yep, it does, cool. So let's now create this this subpage where when we go to /r/funny, we see just the posts from funny and not all of the posts as opposed to the front page. But before we do that, I want to quickly remind you to click the like button on this video. It really helps a lot. And of course, subscribe if you haven't done so yet and hit that bell button. So next time I clone a different website, you get to know what it is. Cheers. All right, so let's create the subpage. So before we touch the front end whatsoever, I want to create the API endpoint that fetches the sub. So let's close everything. Let's go to so our server code, so source, routes, and go to subs. And scroll down and let's create a route that gets a specific sub. So here let's say const. Actually, let's create the route before, so we'll have router.get. And this will be to /. So we're going to get them by the name. So we'll say :name to give this like wildcard thingy. And this will take actually the user, and I'll tell you why. So here, well, let's call it get sub, and let's create it here. So const get sub equals async request of type request and response of type response. Do our arrow function. And here, let's get that name, that subname. So const name equals, and so this is a parameter. So we need to say request.params.name. And let's do our try catch block. So try catch, actually, let me rename this. So error, in case we get an error, I'm just going to console log it. And the usual return res.status 500.json error something, some Oh, I can't type. Something went wrong. Something went wrong with my typing. Okay, so in the try catch block, let's get the sub. So const sub equals await sub, and let's use actually find one or fail, and let's pass it an object. So the condition will just be the name. Now if we do have that sub, actually we could fetch the posts here, but I want to fetch them separately. It's just one more query, so it's kind of simpler for us to read in terms of code. So we'll say const posts equals await post. Actually make sure to import the post entity, and let's say dot find. So here the condition will be, so actually we need a couple of things. So let's say where here and pass sub, and we'll get relations. So we're gonna get all comments, votes. So of course we need this to get the comment count and the vote score. So here we'll say, let's connect them. So let's say sub.posts, posts equals posts, and then let's return them. So return res.json sub. Cool, save that. Have Postman open. So let's go to Postman. So let's log in, make sure you're logged in. So we have a cookie. Actually, I just duped myself into this. Yeah, so logging in reminded me that we need to check if there's a user. Then we do set the user vote. So let's say if request.locals locals.user, actually not request, response, and we'll say sub.posts.for each. For each post, we're gonna call post.set set user vote, and we'll pass the res.locals.user. Cool, so save that. Now let's go to the post collection. Actually, not the post, the subs collection. Let's go to get/API/subs/. So here I'm using React.js. So send this. Nice. So we get information about the sub. We get the posts, and we get the user vote and vote score, comment count, all that good stuff. And if we remove the cookie, we shouldn't get the user vote. Cool, and we don't. All right, so it's checking if there's a user and getting the user vote. All right, so that's the endpoint for, or actually, 8 a.m. Okay, it is sorting them. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, so I wanted to check if it's sorting them latest first. It's not. This one is 8:30. Cool, so actually this reminds me, let's go here where we fetch the posts. We need to order them. So let's say order and pass it an object, and the key will be created at, and the order will be descending. So we order them, so we get the latest one first. So let's go back and check. What is this? Close this, open this. Cool, so 7th of November, 8:31, 8:01, and then 7:21. Cool, so it's now ordered in them by created at. All right, so now let's do the front end. So let's go to our file explorer, go to client, source, pages, and now I should keep going to this. Okay, I don't need this anymore. I'm just gonna close Postman. So what we need to do now is we need to go to this /r/funny and then find that page. So we need to create this /r/ whatever there is after that. So let's go to pages, and to create a kind of like a route group or like a nested route group, we need to create a folder. So because that's /r, we just call it r. And now any file that's inside of here that is a TSX and that is like a next page is going to be /r/ whatever the name of that file. But now this is a wildcard, or like a variable, or a dynamic route. There's so many names for this because this can be different. The syntax for this will be, so inside the R, let's create a new file, and you need to surround the name of that with square brackets. So for us, we're going to call it sub. So we do square bracket sub.tsx. And now we need to export our page. So export default function. Let's call this sub. And here, the way we access this is through the router. So let's say const router equals use router. And actually, I don't know why each time I import something, VS Code does not scroll up. It actually scrolls me down and it hides the import. If any of you knows the solution to this, please let me know, because it's sometimes frustrating. All right, so we have the router. For us to access this wildcard, we simply need to say const, actually it's console logger. So console log router.query. And let's return something. Let's return, for now, let's just return a big header one. Actually, let's say dot text 5xl tab that over and say hello and just save. So now this, if we go to /r/ I don't know, anything /page. Okay, we don't get our hello because I think it's like hiding behind the navbar. But if you go to the console, you see that we got sub page. And if we say hello-world, we get an object that says sub hello world. Nice. So we're getting that wildcard. Let's actually fix this padding thing. So in the index we have a padding top 12, but let's make it so that this is universal and every page that has the navbar at the top is surrounded by a div with a padding top of 12. So I'm actually just gonna cut this, and replace this with a fragment. We could keep the div, but you know, let's avoid the div soup as much as we can. So close this with a fragment. And if we go to our app.tsx, where we have our component, let's surround our component with a div with the class name. And actually we need to check as well if there's a navbar here. So we can simply say, just do an expression here and say if auth route, and just do a ternary. If we're in an auth route, just give an empty class name. Otherwise, give pt-12, save that. And now in the sub, that will have a padding top. And let's go back. Cool, so there's a padding top. And of course, we go back to home. That padding top is still there because now it's universal. All right, so now let's use this wildcard. So you can actually just use it here. We can say router.query.sub. And cool, so now we get whatever there is there, which of course is a very simple way of doing the sub route. So now we need to use this wildcard value to fetch the sub from the backend. So let's go back. I'm actually gonna put this in its own variable, say const sub, actually let's say subname because we're gonna need the keyword sub equals router.query.sub. Let's fetch the data using use SWR. So let's say const data, let's name it sub equals use SWR and make sure to import it and pass it. So the URL will be do backticks /subs / and then do $ curly brace and concatenate the subname to get it from the API. Now this will work, but there's a tiny problem, which is that at the beginning, if you go back, if we refresh this, you see at the beginning that object is empty, and then it gets the sub. So the subname at the beginning is null. So this will fail if we just send it with a null value. But the cool thing about use SWR, we can do conditional fetching. So we can say subname like this and do a ternary. So if that's the case, then we pass this to fetch this. Otherwise, if it's null or undefined, we just pass null. And if we pass null to use SWR, it doesn't fetch anything. So until it gets this value, when it gets this value, then fetch the data and then set it to sub. And now we can use it. So actually here for our header, actually let's just start making the page. So do parentheses and let's wrap everything in a div. Actually just give it some styling. So class name, and let's give it container and flex, and same like the index. So give it some padding on the top. So pt-5. And we need to check for sub because it can be null at the beginning before we fetch it. So we'll say sub and. So if that's the case, so we're going to have a left section, just like the homepage. We're going to have this section and the sidebar, which we'll create later. So let's do that. First section will be .w-160. And here, because we have a sub, that means we have posts with it. So let's loop through them and display them. And so we can say sub.posts.map for each post. We're going to return a post card, import that with a key of post.id and with a post of post. So close that. Now we can type these actually, so it doesn't know what post type is. Oh, actually this reminds me that we need to create a type for sub. Let's do that later, but for now let's just keep it like this, even though it's not perfect TypeScript syntax. All right, save this. Let's take a look at it. So if we go to funny, nice. So we get posts for funny because we're requesting just those. And if we go back to the home page, scroll down, for example, insightful questions, we go there. Cool. So /r/insightful questions, and we get just the post from insightful questions. The key value is not being applied. Actually, yeah, of course, we're not getting the ID. We get the identifier. What am I saying? So just do identifier like that. So save. Now we shouldn't get that warning about using a key in a map loop. Where's the console? Cool, so we don't get the error. We only get unauthorized because we're not logged in. Let's actually log in. So log in, John 1 through 6. Wait, what? 1 through 6? Yes. All right, then we get our user vote as well. Actually, no, this is the home page. Let's go to funny. Cool, we get our user vote as well here. We're gonna as well do so that when we're fetching data, we show like a piece of text that says loading, and as well, we haven't covered the case where if there's no posts, we need to say that there is no posts submitted to this subreddit, even though we don't have a use case to test that. So I'm gonna make this into a variable. So I'm just gonna call this, just cut this and call this posts markup. And here I'm gonna declare it first. So let posts markup, and we'll say if no sub. So if it's null, that means we're fetching it. And we'll say posts markup equals, let's do a paragraph with a text of large with a text center that says loading ... And now we will say else if sub . So here if we have sub, that means we have post as well. So we'll check the length. So if the length equals 0, we'll just say post markup equals, and actually you can do the same piece of text and say instead of loading, we'll say no posts submitted to, or just say yet. Remove those dots, yet, remove this, else. Now here that means we have posts, so we'll say post markup equals what we just copied earlier. So save this, let's check it out. So refresh. Okay, I don't see loading, and that might be because of that caching. Okay, so there's another use case, which is if we supply a name that does not exist, some gibberish, it should not just like fail and just sit here with the empty page. It should actually redirect to the home page, which actually brings us to a different. Okay, why do we get internal server error? Okay, we shouldn't get internal server error. Let's check our subs here. Oh, my bad. We're returning 500, and here find one or fail. It could fail and then return this. Okay, so we're just gonna say probably if this fails, most likely it's not a database connection. We're just gonna say 404, and here say sub. And we can say sub not found, even though we're not going to use this error on the client side. So save this, refresh. Okay, cool. So 404 not found. All right, this is more appropriate. So let's use this and redirect if we fail, which actually brings me to, so if we go, actually we're not getting the error in our fetcher globally. So actually let's make this fetcher into like a separate function so the syntax stays of a line or something. So here let's just call it fetcher, and let's declare it up here. So we'll say const fetcher equals, actually let's make it into an async function. So we'll say async, and it's gonna take a URL. Let's give this a type of string, and it's gonna do something. So we'll do a try catch block. So if we get an error, we're just gonna throw that error. So, and actually the error is in error.response.data because this is Axios. So we'll say const res equals await axios.get that URL, and we return res.data if we do have a response. So now we can actually get that error inside of our sub here. So here, so we get data sub, and we also get error. So let's actually check it out. We can say if error, let's just console log it for now, console log error, and save. So now if we refresh, we go to the console. Okay, property length of undefined, and yeah, that's because of this. So here, let's just say, so that's strange. So it set the value for sub. Oh, it gave a value for sub. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, okay, my bad. So here, this should be this function and not this. This is, it shouldn't return the function itself. It should just take it. So just say fetcher like that, and it will take this. Save. And now let's refresh. All right, so you get undefined. So the post is always undefined, so we don't have to worry. The sub rather is always undefined, so we don't have to worry about that. And if we did get an error, there you go. So we get an error. So now instead of just console logging it, so if we do get an error and that sub doesn't exist, we just redirect to the home page. So we'll say if error router.push to just slash save. Now, cool. So if we go to funny, we see the post from funny. If we say funny and then some gibberish, we press enter. It doesn't find it, it errors, and it redirects us to the home page. Sweet. All right, so that's that for this one. Again, please make sure to like this video and let me know in the comments if you are confused with anything related to anything we covered, or you have any feedback. And of course, subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And yeah, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.